Right now, as you're watching this, only about 5% of the normal ship traffic is moving through the Strait of Hormuz. 5%. That single number is going to reshape your grocery bill, your gas bill, your rent, and your job, probably before the end of this year. And the strangest part is that almost nobody on financial TV is connecting the dots out loud, because the dots lead somewhere uncomfortable. This isn't 2008. There won't be a housing crash you can buy the dip on. This isn't 2020. There won't be a stimulus check waiting in your account. What's coming is something the US economy hasn't actually faced since the 1970s. And even that comparison is generous, because in the 70s, America still made most of what it consumed. Today, it doesn't. Let me show you exactly how this plays out, step by step, so you can stop being surprised every time the headlines move. Here's what's verifiable right now. On February 28th, the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. Iran's supreme leader was killed. Iran retaliated by attacking US bases, Israeli cities, and Gulf state oil infrastructure. By March 4th, Iran declared the Strait of Hormuz closed. By April 13th, the US Navy was running its own counter-blockade of Iranian ports. A dual blockade. That's the actual term being used in policy briefings. Roughly a quarter of the world's seaborne crude oil and a fifth of the world's liquefied natural gas pass through that strait. Not passes through occasionally. Passes through every single day. In 2024, around 84% of that oil was headed to Asia. China alone gets a third of its oil through Hormuz. So when shipping drops to 5% of normal, what you're really watching is one of the load-bearing walls of the global economy buckling in real time. Here's the part most coverage misses. This isn't only about oil. The Persian Gulf produces about 30% of the world's exported urea fertilizer and a similar share of ammonia. That fertilizer feeds the wheat that feeds about a third of the planet. When the strait closes, the next planting season gets harder. The one after that gets dangerous. That's the setup. Now let's talk about why this is different from every recession scare you've heard for the last 15 years. Most recessions follow a familiar script. Demand collapses, prices fall, the Fed cuts rates, asset prices recover, life moves on. Painful but legible. What's coming is not that. The recession of the 1970s had a name economists try not to say out loud anymore. Stagflation. Stagnant growth combined with rising prices. It is the worst possible combination because the standard tools cancel each other out. If the Fed cuts rates to fight the recession, inflation gets worse. If the Fed raises rates to fight inflation, the recession gets worse. There is no clean exit. You just choose which fire to fight first. Here's why we're heading into that exact box. The recession part is easy to see. Oil priced in the 80s and 90s per barrel climbing. Shipping insurance premiums in the Strait jumped from 0.125% per transit to as high as 0.4%. For a supertanker, that's roughly $250,000 in extra cost per trip before you've moved a single drop. That cost ends up in everything you buy. Manufacturing slows. Layoffs follow. Standard recession. The inflation part is what makes it cruel. Energy is upstream of literally everything. The truck that brings food to your supermarket runs on diesel. The fertilizer that grew the food was made from natural gas. The plastic on the packaging is a petroleum product. The factory in Vietnam that made your shirt runs on coal-fired electricity that just got more expensive because every other energy source got more expensive too. When energy costs rise, the price of everything rises. Not next year, this quarter. So your paycheck stays the same or shrinks while your weekly grocery run climbs 10, 15, 20%. That's not a forecast. That's already starting. There's a deeper layer to this, and it's worth understanding because it explains why the US response has been what it's been. Since the 1970s, the global oil trade has been priced almost entirely in US dollars. That arrangement, informally called the petrodollar system, is one of the main reasons the dollar is the world's reserve currency. Every country that wants to buy oil needs dollars. So every country holds dollars. So America gets to borrow cheaply, run deficits the rest of the world couldn't get away with, and project power globally. That arrangement has been quietly fraying for years. China has been buying oil from Russia and Iran in yuan since the early 2020s. Saudi Arabia has openly discussed accepting yuan for some sales. The whole architecture that's underwritten American economic dominance for 50 years is, slowly, being renegotiated. Now, I'm not going to tell you what's in any specific person's head in the White House. Nobody knows that. But I can tell you what the strategic logic of the current situation looks like from the outside. If the Middle East is unstable enough that Asian buyers have to look elsewhere for oil, where do they look? Increasingly North America. The US is now the world's largest oil producer. Add the recent reshaping of Venezuela's relationship with Washington, and you have a plausible architecture where the Western Hemisphere becomes the swing supplier for the world. Every barrel sold from that hemisphere is sold in dollars. The petrodollar gets a second life. That's the optimistic version of the strategy, if it is a strategy. There's also a pessimistic version, which is that no one is steering this, and we just stumble into a long, ugly conflict because nobody can find the off-ramp. Both versions end with the same thing for you: high energy prices for a long time. A common mistake people make is assuming that because America has its own oil, America is fine. That's not how integrated markets work. When global oil prices rise, US oil prices rise too. Producers sell to whoever pays the most. The only way to decouple American prices from world prices is export controls. And export controls have a name in the rest of the world: economic warfare. The countries that depend on Middle Eastern oil aren't going to politely accept being cut off. They'll buy from Russia. They'll buy from sanctioned sources. They'll cut deals that further erode the very dollar system Washington is trying to protect. So there's a tightening squeeze. Either prices in the US rise hard, or prices stay manageable in the US, but the rest of the dollar-based order falls apart faster. Probably some of both. The countries that get hit first and worst are the ones with no domestic energy and no leverage. Japan imports about 95% of its energy. South Korea similar. Much of Southeast Asia, most of Africa. These places aren't speculating about an energy crisis. They're rationing already. The International Energy Agency has released roughly 400 million barrels from strategic reserves to soften the blow, which sounds like a lot until you remember the world burns about 100 million barrels a day. 4 days of cushion. That's what 400 million barrels actually buys you. Let me walk through the realistic scenarios, ranked roughly by probability. Scenario 1, the muddle. Talks limp along. The strait partially reopens for some flagged vessels, which is already happening. Iran has been letting Chinese, Russian, Indian, Iraqi, and Pakistani ships through, and granted access to Malaysian, Thai, and Philippine vessels after bilateral talks. A two-tier global oil market emerges where some countries pay a cooperation premium and others pay a war premium. Prices stay elevated for 12 to 18 months. Mild to moderate recession in the West. Severe stress in the developing world. This is the most likely outcome. Scenario 2, the deal. Pakistan-mediated talks produce a framework. Iran reopens the strait in exchange for sanctions relief and security guarantees. Oil prices fall sharply. Markets rally. The recession is short and shallow. This is possible, but the diplomatic surface area is enormous, and any single failure cascades. Scenario 3, escalation. A miscalculation in the strait. A missile that hits the wrong ship. A strike that kills the wrong person. And the conflict broadens. Saudi or Emirati infrastructure gets hit again. Oil goes to triple digits and stays there. Deep global recession. This is the scenario nobody wants and nobody can fully rule out. What you should not do is bet your financial life on any single one of these. The honest answer is that the range of outcomes is wider right now than it has been in decades. And the people who tell you with certainty which one is coming are selling you something. I'm not going to give you specific investment advice. I'm not your financial advisor and I don't know your situation. But I'll tell you what the categories of preparation look like, and you can do your own work from there. Cash flow first. Recessions are won and lost on cash flow, not on portfolio gains. If your monthly expenses are tight, that's the first thing to address. Before stocks, before gold, before any of it. The household that can absorb a job loss for 6 months survives almost any economic environment. The one that can't, doesn't. Energy exposure isn't optional anymore. Not necessarily oil stocks. That's a specific bet. But understanding that your job, your industry, your region, and your supply chain all have an energy cost embedded in them. And stress testing whether you'd be okay if that cost doubled. If you work in airlines, trucking, manufacturing, or anything that ships physical goods, the answer matters more. Geographic and currency diversification. If everything you own is in one country, in one currency, denominated in one financial system, you're carrying more concentration risk than you probably realize. This isn't doomerism. It's just how households in countries that have lived through real currency stress have always thought. Skills that compound. In any economy, but especially in a stagflationary one, the people who do best are the ones whose income can rise faster than prices. That usually means skills, not assets. The most underpriced investment available to most people is still the one you can make in your own ability to earn. Look, I don't enjoy making videos like this. The world is already loud enough with people telling you to panic. My goal isn't to scare you. It's to make sure that when you watch the news over the next 6 months and see oil prices spike, fertilizer shortages in the headlines, factories cutting shifts, and politicians sounding more desperate than usual, you'll already understand why. And that understanding is most of the battle. The 70s were hard. People got through them. People built lives, raised families, and accumulated wealth in that decade. But the ones who did it were the ones who saw what was happening early and adjusted, instead of waiting for the world to go back to the way it used to be. That world isn't coming back. Something else is taking shape. The sooner you accept that, the better the choices you'll make. Take care of yourselves out there.